Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's telephone town hall with Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. My name is Robin, and I'll be your moderator this evening. During tonight's call, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you. There are a few ways to participate in tonight's call. If you would like to ask the Congresswoman a question this evening, press *3 on your telephone keypad now or at any time during the call. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, press *6 on your telephone keypad. We're also streaming live this evening on our Facebook page, which is Rep. Sara Jacobs. And as I mentioned, this is an interactive forum, and we'd love to hear from you this evening. During this call, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you, and we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as we possibly can this evening. Again, to ask a question, press *3 now on your telephone keypad. You'll be connected directly with one of our staff members, and that staff member will take down your name, the city that you live in, and they'll note your questions and add you to the call queue so you can ask your question. When you hear your name again, you'll be live on the call, and you'll be able to ask Congresswoman Jacobs your question directly. And again, if you're streaming the event, you can post your name and your question below the streaming player. You may also sign up for the Congresswoman's e-newsletter by pressing *6 at any time during the call. And if you prefer to subscribe online, you may do so at sarajacobs.house.gov. Now, with that, I'd like to turn the call over to your Congresswoman, Sara Jacobs. Congresswoman, the floor is yours. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Well, thanks so much, Robin, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being on the call tonight. I always love getting opportunities to chat with you all. I am in Washington, D.C., and it was 101 degrees today, so I'm really missing San Diego right now, but I am super excited to be home this weekend to celebrate San Diego Pride and hope to see lots of you there. So look, we know that basically everyone is struggling to afford the everyday necessities, and the struggle in San Diego is even harder, right, where we've had a high cost of living for as long as I've been in office and much longer. Housing is too expensive. There's not enough of it to go around. Only 13% of households in San Diego can afford a median-priced home, and the average rents are 44% higher than the national average. That's why I am so proud that we were able to pass the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, and it just became law. This is the first major housing bill we've passed in decades. It's very exciting. This law will crack down on corporate investors buying up single-family homes. It will cut red tape so we can actually build housing again, and it will lower housing costs. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This one law is not going to solve everything. But it does show that Congress can still do big things, and we can still do things in a bipartisan way, and I'm going to keep working to make sure that we address housing costs. We also know that childcare is a huge issue for so many families in San Diego. Many San Diego parents are spending over 40% of their income on childcare alone, and 2/3 of San Diego kids live in childcare deserts. So that's why I've been really focused on, and it's really close to my heart, to get legislation that will meet the scale of this crisis. I truly believe that we need free, universal, high-quality child care and a system that's built on equity and accessibility that guarantees providers fair pay and good benefits and makes sure parents have the choices they need. And that's what I'm fighting for, and I'm hopeful that we are doing the work now so that we will actually be able to get it done with a Democratic House majority. Now, we all know that President Trump has instituted tariffs. Those tariffs have cost the average American family an extra $1,700 on everyday goods like groceries and cars and electronics. So I'm glad that the Supreme Court ruled his blanket tariffs were illegal, but now he's pushing other ways to enact tariffs. So my colleagues and I are pushing to end these tariffs and deliver refunds to the American people, not just to the corporations. And we were able to successfully pass a discharge petition, which is the way that we're able to pass things even when Speaker Johnson doesn't want to put them on the floor, to end tariffs on Canada, and now we're working on a similar effort to end tariffs on Brazil. 2 weeks ago, the USMCA, our trade agreement with Mexico and Canada that replaced NAFTA, came up for its first scheduled review, and Trump refused to renew it. The agreement is still in effect, but instead of locking it in for another 16 years of certainty, we're now stuck renegotiating every year. And for a border economy like ours, where trade through this agreement is crucial, that uncertainty has real costs. But the good news is that Congress passed the law that put USMCA into effect, so Trump is not allowed to rewrite it alone, no matter what he may think. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure that our cross-border region is able to thrive, that we have cross-border tariff-free trade, that we protect the labor standards we fought for, and that we get more funding to address the Tijuana River Valley crisis. Lastly, for us in San Diego, I know that Trump's war in Iran is top of mind, especially because so many of our folks are deployed there and so many more are on 48-hour deployment notice. Trump's war in Iran has also raised the cost of groceries and gas. Gas is now almost $6 a gallon again in San Diego. And we are not getting anything by continuing the war in Iran. It's prolonging the high costs for Americans. It's threatening our troops' safety. And honestly, it gives Iran less incentive to get to a deal and adhere to it. It's why both the House and the Senate have passed war powers resolutions. And I've introduced my own war powers resolution. But Trump is continuing to prolong this war anyway. He's launching even more strikes, trying to control the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. And I will say that no matter what Donald Trump thinks, just changing the name of the military operation does not get around the need for congressional authorization. We are going to keep doing everything we can to end this war and block funding for it so that we can bring our troops home and bring costs down. So that was just a brief overview, but mostly I want to make sure I have a chance to answer all of your questions. That's always my favorite. So make sure to press *3 if you have a question for me or type it into the chat interface. And Robin, you can start calling on folks.
Yes, ma'am. So first question, Congresswoman, is it's actually an online question, and it's Amanda has asked, after that horrible address that just happened, how are you going to protect our right to vote? How are you going to like she says, how are you going to, like, who we elect? How are you going to, I don't know, like the question's a little convoluted, but she's basically saying, how are we going to make sure that who we elect makes it to office?
Yeah, well, Amanda, thank you for that question. And I know it's something that's on a lot of people's mind. I actually watched that address regretfully, and I will say it was horrifying. Donald Trump is clearly desperate to rewrite the past so that he can try and seize control of future elections. Now, I want to reassure everyone that we have confirmation from our country's top intelligence and law enforcement agencies that there was no evidence of significant voter fraud in American elections and that the 2020 elections were secure. More than 60 courts, including judges appointed by Trump himself, have already looked at his false claims about the 2020 election and rejected them. Our courts have upheld the integrity of our election system, and it's incredibly dangerous for Trump to continue pushing this lie, which is what led to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, which you all know was my fourth day in office, and which, you know, was a deeply scary and horrible day for our whole country. So I'm going to keep pushing back on his lies so that every American's vote is counted. One of the things he mentioned in his speech was the SAVE Act, this bill that he wants Congress to pass. The thing is that this bill would actually make it harder for millions of Americans to vote, especially young people and married women and folks in rural communities. And that's why every single time it's been on the House floor, which has been many, I have voted against it, and I will continue doing so. Now, that's what we have done. But I know your real question is, how do we make sure that the 2026 elections are actually happen, are free and fair, and then that the people who win are seated? So actually, just this week, a number of us House Democrats did a tabletop exercise where we looked at any possible way that the Republicans are going to try and subvert the election and twist the election results. We are working closely with Democratic attorneys general, with our Senate counterparts, with colleagues in civil society, with lawyers, to make sure that we are all ready and all coordinated for whatever they might try and throw at us. So we understand the scale of what they're going to try and do, and we are trying to be ready for it. But I also want to make sure everyone knows I feel very confident in our actual election system. Basically, in this country, every election is run by each county in each state. It's a very distributed system. So it's actually really, really hard to overtake each one of those. There's actually a lot of resilience in this distributed system. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to try everything. It doesn't mean they're not going to try to put ICE agents. It's not going to mean they're not going to try and do who knows what. But I have faith in our actual election system. And to your question, Amanda, about making sure the people we elect actually take office, we are working hard to try and figure out everything they might try and do around counting and certifying votes. Courts have already ruled that officials can't refuse to certify results, and if anyone tries this fall, we'll be in court immediately. That's one of the scenarios we actually played out in yesterday's tabletop exercise. So I know it all feels really scary, and they are going to try everything, but we are ready and preparing for everything, and I feel confident that we will be able to make sure that every eligible voter knows when, where, and how to cast their ballot, and that their vote will count, because basically we need to make sure that people vote because our power comes from voting.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. And folks, if you've just joined the call, we did mention this is an interactive call this evening. We would love to hear from you. If you have a question for Congresswoman Jacobs, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you would like to stay up to date on what the Congresswoman is working on in Washington and in your district, please press *6 to subscribe to her e-newsletter. Congresswoman, next question comes from Pat, and Pat says, is there any hope of forcing a stop to the war in Iran and getting our troops out of the area?
Well, Pat, thank you for this question. This is something I'm thinking about a lot, both because we have so many San Diegans that are in harm's way. I sit on both the House Armed Services and the House Foreign Affairs Committees, so I'm on the committees of jurisdiction, and we are constantly working on this. So both the Senate and the House have passed war powers resolutions to stop this war. I've actually introduced my own war powers resolution. We are working to make sure that we always have a war powers resolution ready to go so we can keep forcing votes on it. Now, it's a little bit complicated about the parliamentary reasons why, even though the House and the Senate have both passed this, it hasn't actually gone to the president's desk. But we're going to keep making sure we have these to vote on and work to get it to the president's desk. We're also working to make sure that we prevent money from going to this war. The Republicans next week are planning, supposedly, on having us vote on a third reconciliation bill. Reconciliation is the way that you can do things on a party line vote so that it only requires 50 votes, not 60 votes in the Senate. It will include $73 billion for the Iran war in it. I will vote against it. I've also voted against any funding for this war during the NDAA committee markup, the National Defense Authorization Act, and I've co-sponsored the No Funds for Iran War Act. All of which is to say we are working very hard to get the Trump administration to see that we are not gaining anything from continuing this war, and that Trump should end these strikes and negotiate in good faith, and I'm hopeful that we will be successful in that soon.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Justin, and Justin says, I work in the Navy ship repair here in San Diego. The right to repair provision you fought for in fiscal year 27 NDAA would make a real difference for repair yards like mine that are stuck waiting on OEM sign-off for a hydraulic and deck equipment work. And then the question cuts off, and I apologize. I'm not sure if I understand that question completely.
That's okay. I think, so Justin, your question cut off in the chat, but I am so happy to see that you asked about the right to repair because I love talking about this. And thank you for the work you do, Justin. The San Diego ship repair industry is essential to our Navy and to our regional economy, and I know it's hard work. So for folks on the call who are not maybe as nerdy about all of this as Justin and I are, OEM means original equipment manufacturer. So basically the company that originally built the equipment. So right now, often repair yards can't touch gear without that company's sign-off, even for routine maintenance work. That means longer waits, higher costs, and ships stuck pierside because contractors lock up the technical data the military needs to fix equipment it already owns. That's why I fought for the right to repair provision in this year's National Defense Authorization Act. And the good news is that it is in both the House and the Senate version, which puts us in a really strong position for it to become law. And we are not going to settle for a watered-down version like last year's compromise because the military needs real access to repair its own equipment, not a study or a half measure. So, Justin, please follow up with my office because I want your experience on the record as we push this over the finish line, and I want to make sure that the second half of your question we are able to answer. And I'm super excited that we are getting really close to actually getting this done.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Thank you for understanding that question as clearly as you did. So, folks, we had mentioned that this is an interactive call this evening. We want to hear from you. We do have poll questions for you this evening. And we ask these poll questions because they help us learn a bit about you so that we're better able to assist you. So we're going to kick off the first poll question, and you'll respond. Please respond using your telephone keypad. So we'd like to know, what costs are you most worried about right now? Housing. Press 1 for housing. Press 2 for childcare. Press 3 for utilities. Press 4 for healthcare. And press 5 if you're worried about all of those. And I'll ask that question again. We want to know, what costs are you most worried about right now? Press 1 for housing, 2 for childcare, 3 for utilities, 4 for healthcare, and 5 for all of the above. Congresswoman, we're going to take our first telephone call from Sabrina of Mission Valley. Sabrina, you are live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Sabrina.
Hi, Congresswoman. I'm concerned with ICE and the facilities, the overcrowding, and the ability for you as a Congresswoman to go in and inspect these facilities. Also, the aggression and the lack of training. What can you do to help us to ease our nerves?
Well, thank you, Sabrina, for the question. And I know this is something that, it weighs on so many of us. And I so appreciate all the work that our community has done to draw attention to this and to make sure that I know what you all are hearing. So I've regularly conducted oversight at the Otay Detention Center, both through announced and unannounced inspections, and I'll continue to do that. My most recent inspection was an announced one. It was last month. And I saw the pods, the law library, where the food is made. I tasted the food and the water. We did ask questions about the training and the policies, but they didn't let us talk to any of the people who were detained there because of a new ICE policy that they handed to us that was dated that day. So that is unacceptable, and I'm going to keep showing up. Now, I know that sometimes oversight doesn't feel like it's enough, but we have actually been able to get things changed because we've shown up. And one of the most important ways that we can do that is when people share with us the information that they are getting about people's rights being denied or not getting the medicine they need, not getting the food they need. Because when I just go and ask them broad questions, they have an answer for it. So if I can have specific cases that need to get fixed, then I can often address it. So please, 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 everyone, please continue sharing what you're hearing with us. It is so incredibly helpful, and it enables me to do my oversight job better. Now, in addition to the Otay Mesa Detention Center, I've also visited immigration detention facilities across the country. I'll be honest, the Dilley Detention Center in Texas was one of the hardest oversight visits I've done, to see toddlers there who have done nothing wrong locked up. So I'm going to continue to do oversight to ensure that people who are detained are afforded their legal, civil, and human rights, and that everyone is following the law. And I'm hopeful that when we are in the majority, we will be able to put some real legal checks on what ICE can do.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Next caller is Marilyn from San Diego. Hi, Marilyn. You're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn. You're live on the call. Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm live right now because I recorded something earlier. Do you want me to re-ask it?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm Marilyn. I'm involved with real estate. I love all the things that Sara Jacobs does. I read thoroughly the new housing bill that just went through. I think it's 6644, HR 6644, something like that. My question is, it has amazing things that are going to happen to us, be available to us in San Diego for housing, but it's going to be administered by HUD. There is no HUD regional office in San Diego. That bothers me. I made some phone calls. There are no provisions in that damn bill to pay for the administration of the bill. So we have this amazing bill with these amazing things that are going to happen. Federal money is going to flow. There's no way to work it. And I'm sure Sara Jacobs has an answer for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Marilyn, for your faith in me and for following this so closely and everything you do for our community. So you're right that the bill itself does not include new funding for HUD. Now, I'm not as concerned about that because typically for these bills, we do it in two steps. So Congress has two kinds of committees. We have authorizing committees and appropriating committees. And what we do is in the authorizing committees, we set policy, and then the appropriations committee gives the money. So this bill is an authorization bill. It's a bill that sets policy. The policy is cracking down on corporate investors, cutting red tape so we can build, and streamlining HUD programs. The money then will come separately through the annual appropriations bill that fund HUD that we are currently negotiating over right now. So it is true that this bill doesn't have new money, but I'm not actually that concerned for a few reasons. One, most of this law doesn't need new money. Many of the reforms are just policies that will take effect on their own that won't require HUD to actually have to do anything. The second reason I'm not that worried is that because the law streamlined HUD programs, every dollar will actually be able to go farther than before. But you are pointing to the fact that the fight is not over, which is very true. We are still going to have a very real fight on appropriations. And right now, Trump and House Republicans are trying to slash HUD programs like rental assistance, homelessness funding, and we are working to fight those cuts and pushing for the highest possible housing funding this cycle. So basically, the rules are now solved, or at least some of them, and now we have to win the funding fight, which, I'll be honest, will be a lot easier if we are in the majority. And in the meantime, my office can connect you or anyone with housing programs that exist. And I'm always, always, always looking for more good ideas on how to solve our housing crisis in San Diego. So if you have ideas, wild, crazy, out-of-the-box, pie-in-the-sky ideas, welcome. Please send them in because it's going to take all of our creativity to get this done.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Folks, if you've just joined the call and you'd like to ask the Congresswoman a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you're enjoying this update and you want to stay up to date with what your Congresswoman is working on, press *6 to subscribe to her e-newsletter. Congresswoman, next question comes from Frank of the College area. Frank, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Frank. Hi, Frank, you're live on the call. Please go ahead. Congresswoman, I'm going to take a liberty and I'm going to go ahead and ask the question on Frank's behalf. His question is, why haven't you passed impeachment resolution?
Well, Frank, it's a good question, and one I get often. I will vote for any impeachment resolution that comes to the floor. But the fact of the matter is, we don't have the votes for impeachment right now. So basically, the way it works is that the House brings forward articles of impeachment. It's a majority vote to impeach. Then it goes to a trial in the Senate, and that takes 2/3 of senators to convict. Now, we neither have the votes in the House nor the Senate to impeach, let alone and convict. So trying to impeach right now will not be successful, and I really worry, as someone who has studied democratic backsliding in other countries, who has looked at many countries and how you want to protect institutions and protect against what's happening right now. I really worry that an unsuccessful impeachment will only further embolden Trump. So while I will vote in favor of articles of impeachment whenever they come to the floor, I think it's really important, and I did so twice just last year. I think it's really important that we be really strategic about how we go about doing impeachment so that we can do an impeachment that is successful and actually solves the problem, not just something that's going to make us feel good, but actually potentially further embolden Trump because it won't succeed.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Folks, just a couple of minutes ago, we asked you our first poll question, and we asked you, what costs are you most worried about right now? And I want to share the results of your response. The results of your response were 18% of you are concerned about housing. Just 1% of you are concerned about childcare. 15% of you are concerned about utilities, 18% healthcare, and 48% of you responded all of the above. Congresswoman, next question comes from Cindy of La Mesa. Hi, Cindy. You're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Cindy.
Oh my gosh, I thought I left a message. Hi, Sarah. I love you being my congresswoman, by the way. My question is, and you kind of briefly spoke of it, is if you get the majorities back, I just hope you'll focus on fixing things in our country, and really the Trump impeachment court thing. I think we should just maybe get the people in the class action lawsuit and sue him and hurt him where it counts in his bank account. But I really don't want Congress's time wasted on things that might not be fruitful because we tried and failed already. That's a.
Well, thank you, Cindy, and I love being your representative too. I think that when we are in the majority, we're going to have to be able to walk and chew gum. We're going to have to do very real oversight and accountability at every level, looking at all of the things the Trump administration has done. I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I think we're going to have to do a real investigation around what happened over USAID and what laws were broken, for instance. But that's not all we have to do. We also need to have a forward-looking agenda about how we are going to improve the lives of the American people, because it is not enough for us just to be against Trump. We have to be for something, and I would argue we have to be for something big and bold, and that is at the same scale as the challenges that we're facing, which is why I'm very diligent that I spend at least some percentage of my time, even in all of this chaos that is going on, and even with all the time I spend trying to stop what Trump is doing, to also be working on what our bold vision is going to be and how we're going to do it. So I'm working on a child care bill that I'm super excited about that would be free and universal, that I think should be a huge part of what we do, one of our main priorities when we're in the majority. We also need to address housing and to do even more than the 21st Century Road to Housing Act to actually be able to build at the scale we need. We need to address the broken healthcare system. We need to end the tariffs, to end the skyrocketing costs on everyday goods. We need to end the Iran war and lower gas prices. There is so much that we are going to need to do to show the American people that if they give us the majority, if they give us the presidency, we have real solutions to the challenges they're facing. And so I agree with you, Cindy. We have to be able to do that when we're in the majority.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Next caller is Jay from Kensington. Hi, Jay. You're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Jay.
Hi, Sarah. My question for you is, what is yours and the Democratic Party's strategy for legislation to prevent another criminal presidency like this from happening in the first place? Because it seems the guardrails didn't hold, and we need much more firm laws that codify what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in office.
Yeah, Jay, I couldn't agree with you more. So this is one of the most corrupt administrations in American history. So in the short term, what we plan to do is that we have introduced legislation, and I'm a co-sponsor of it, that will ban stock trading by members of Congress and senior officials in the executive branch. Because I believe that there's no excuse for any member of government to be even giving the perception that they might be doing something for their own profit instead of for the good of the American people. And we know that what Trump is doing, profiting off of market moving announcements, all of what he's doing would get any regular federal employee fired and prosecuted. But the problem is that our ethics laws were never built for a president willing just to ignore them. So I think that that Speaker Johnson should put that bill on the floor and we should pass it. Now, there's a rumor that he's going to try and put a sort of watered down version of it with some poison pills on the floor next week. So we'll see if that happens. But we have a robust bill that every House Democrat has signed on to that we will pass in the majority if Speaker Johnson refuses to put it on the floor now. Now, there are also bills that have been introduced that would require presidents to divest assets, to release tax returns, to close the loopholes Trump is exploiting, like his crypto ventures, his foreign payments. They're written, they're ready. Speaker Johnson and the Republicans refuse to move them, but we plan to when we're in power. And just in this year's National Defense Authorization Act, I was actually able to get in a provision that bans officials from trading on prediction markets, because we know that that is something that has happened and it's not good. But even more broadly, Jay, I think you bring up an incredibly important point. And I am thinking a lot about the fact that after Nixon and Watergate, in a bipartisan way, Congress came together and passed a series of institutional reforms to try and make sure that something like that couldn't happen again. And I think we need to do the same thing, that we have to close some of the loopholes that Trump is exploiting. We have to pass new laws, but we also need, I would argue, something like a select committee or, a real consolidated way to look at all of the different institutional reform that we're going to need, just like the Watergate generation did, and make sure that we get that done so that we can make sure that we are not in a situation like this again.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And folks, we had mentioned earlier that this is an interactive call, and we'd love to hear from you this evening, and that we have poll questions for you. We'd like to ask you our second poll question and remind you we do appreciate your participation. Please respond using your telephone keypad. Our second poll question, we'd like to know, do you support or oppose Donald Trump's Save America Act, which would make it harder to vote? Press 1 if you support, the Save America Act. Press 2 if you oppose the Save America Act, and press 3 if you're unsure. And I'll repeat the question for you. We want to know, do you support or oppose Donald Trump's Save America Act, which would make it harder to vote? Press 1 if you support, 2 if you oppose, and 3 if you're unsure. Congresswoman, next question was submitted online. Nancy submits this question for you, ma'am. Nancy says, what can we do at this time to feel like we have some power in eliminating the devastation this administration is making of our country?
Well, Nancy, it's a really good question, and I know things feel so difficult right now, and so many of us feel overwhelmed and hopeless and helpless and frustrated. But I want to remind you that this is their strategy. They want us to feel overwhelmed and to feel like we don't get a say in what's happening. They want to do things so quickly that, and so many things that it's drowning us, so that we feel discouraged and disillusioned and we give up and shut everything out. So first of all, I want to congratulate everyone who's on this call, because you are already doing one of the most important things you can do. You are engaging with your elected officials and holding us accountable. And that is incredibly important. And you are not letting them make you feel alone. You are showing up. You are being in community. And we need to keep doing that, showing up and being in community. Now, I often tell people, if you're overwhelmed at what's happening at the federal level, go local. Go pick up trash. I just, when I was home last week, went and picked up trash with the Ken Tao litter pickers. It was so empowering because we all have something we can do to help our community. And the more we can do to build community, to stay in community, to make our community better, to make sure that everyone in our community feels welcomed, that is actually how we're going to rebuild our country, block by block, neighbor by neighbor. So talk to your friends and family and neighbors. Especially check on your immigrant neighbors who might be worried about going to the grocery store or to drop their kid off at school, and see if they need anything. Volunteer. And most importantly, vote, because we actually have a very real, tangible way to improve things, and that is to vote and to change our Congress so that we have a Congress that will actually stand up to Donald Trump and hold him accountable. And I just want to remind you that while I know it feels like Donald Trump doesn't care about what we think and doesn't care about public pressure, it actually isn't true. We have been able to change things in this administration because of public pressure. Most recently, we were able to stop Donald Trump's $1.7 billion weaponization fund that would have been a slush fund for the insurrectionists who stormed the U.S. Capitol. So we are able to change things. We do have agency. We can make a difference, and it's going to take all of us doing each of our little part. We don't all have to do everything. We just each have to do something. It's like, I'm not really a sports girl, but I'm going to give you a sports metaphor. We're not playing man-to-man. We are playing zone defense. It's about all of us together being able to do what we need to do, not each of us alone. It's like a relay race, not a marathon, you know? Pick up the baton, give it. Okay, I'm out of sports metaphors, but go Padres. Anyways, don't lose hope. We are going to win. And actually, when we look at other countries that have experienced the kind of democratic backsliding that we've experienced in our country, when they've been able to put together a broad-based pro-democracy movement, they've actually been able to get a better democracy on the other side. So that's what gives me hope, is that this is not actually about going back. What we're fighting for is a better democracy on the other side, and I really, truly believe that working together, we're going to get it done.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And folks, just to remind you, there's still time to ask your question to get into the call queue. Press *3 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. And if you're enjoying this update and you want to stay up to date with what your Congresswoman is working on in Washington and in your district, I encourage you to subscribe to her e-newsletter. You could do that by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. Congresswoman, next question comes from India of San Diego. Hi, India. You're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, India.
Okay, thank you so much for taking my question. This has been really an inspiring call, and I just want to thank you for all your good work. My husband and I were coming back through the San Ysidro border into San Diego last week, and we waited 6 hours at the border. And I heard reports that earlier on in the Trump administration, there was an 8-hour wait in which an elderly woman died in line trying to get back into her own country. So is there something that can be done? Because these are unprecedented wait times. Before Trump, the line was 1 hour, max 3 hours. Now it's a minimum of 3 hours, up to 8 hours.
Well, India, thanks for sharing, and I'm so sorry that you had to experience that, and someone dying in line waiting to cross is completely unacceptable. And this is a real crisis. So what is happening is that this administration has pulled CBP officers off of ports of entry to do interior enforcement and immigration raids. So like we have those booths, right, at San Ysidro and Otay Mesa, but they're sitting empty and the lines are backing up for hours. Now, I've pushed CBP for answers on staffing at our ports, and I'm demanding that they get officers back in the booths where they're actually needed, because for our border region, we really depend on people crossing the border every day, right? So many people in our community, workers, families, students, shoppers, literally cross the border every single day. And when the wait hits 6 hours, that's paychecks lost and businesses hurt on both sides of the border. So I am working to get our ports of entry staffed so that people can move across safely and quickly. I don't think that's a big ask. I literally think that's the basic job of CBP. And I want to make sure you all know that if you or anyone you know has been mistreated by border officers, punished for visiting Mexico, held without reason, please, please, please report it to my office. We track these cases. We raise them directly with CBP. It makes a difference. If you're having issues, we can often open casework for you and try and get answers. So please make sure you reach out to my office because we want to be able to hold these folks accountable. And, you can do so at sarajacobs.house.gov or 619-280-5353.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Hey, folks, just want to share the poll results. Real quickly, we asked you, do you support or oppose Donald Trump's Save America Act, which would make it harder to vote? I want to share the poll results. 4% of you support, 91% of you oppose, 5% of you are unsure. Congresswoman, next caller is Lori from Tierra Santa. Hi, Lori. You're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Lori.
Hi, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for doing this call. It was a pleasant surprise for our evening, and thank you for everything that you are doing for us. I do have one concern, though. The Sunshine Protection Act just went through the House, and it passed by a landslide. And I did notice that you did vote for it, in favor of it. And I just wanted to know, your reasoning behind your choice in doing so, because I am a healthcare worker and I understand and researcher, and I'm very concerned about what it can do to our circadian rhythm and mental health. I know that Hawaii and Arizona both use standard time, and so this is going to affect them as well. So I'd love to hear your input on that.
Yeah, well, Lori, thank you so much for the question. So first of all is that the bill has a provision that if you already have permanent standard time, you have a waiver. And so Hawaii and Arizona will not be impacted. But I did vote yes for a couple of key reasons. First, we know that, switching itself is a real problem, right? And so we need, and people, including myself, are just tired of the clock changes, and we need to stop that. And so then the question is, do you stop it by keeping everything on standard time, and do you stop it by keeping everything on daylight savings time? For me, the reason I voted yes was a fewfold. One, California a few years ago actually voted on this. It was a ballot proposition, and Californians overwhelmingly voted in favor of permanent daylight savings time. And so for me, it was simply a question of following the will of California's voters who overwhelmingly voted for it. Now, I also think that having more daylight after work, when people actually get to live their lives, is really important, right? Especially for us in San Diego, our whole way of life is built around being outside, and more evening light means more time at the beach or the park or just walking the neighborhood after dinner. I hate 4:30 p.m. sunsets in winter. They are miserable. And I know a lot of other folks feel that way too. Now, I know that there are very real concerns about, what happens in the morning for kids going to school. Personally, I think that we should be starting school later anyways. There's a lot of research that shows that it's not good for kids to start school at 7:45 in the morning, for instance. And so I think this might be a good opportunity to align school start times with, when the research shows that that it is better for kids to start school. And I think there will be other issues we need to mitigate. But at the end of the day, I think picking one is better than us switching. And, because Californians voted on this, and because, so much of our life in San Diego is about being outside and after work hours or when we do it, that's why I voted yes on this.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Our next question was submitted online by Christopher, and Christopher says or asks, what can we do to ensure that the congressional district to our east elects a representative that supports our interests rather than big money interests?
Well, Christopher, thank you for the question. I'm actually super excited that in redistricting, CA 51 is now going to include a big chunk of East County. We are going to get Alpine and Descanso and Julian and Mount Laguna and Lakeside, Country Estates. So I am really looking forward to actually making sure that people in East County have real representation. I plan on showing up as much as I can, and I'm super excited to meet all of my new constituents and get to know these new areas and their priorities.
Thank you so much. Next question comes from Ben of La Mesa. Hey, Ben, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Ben.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Congresswoman, for taking the calls. So my question is really about really trying to find out what discussions are being had at the federal level about AI, specifically around artificial general intelligence and how the potential job displacement can be mitigated by something like universal basic income. Because I don't really hear a lot about the impact of AI in the near future. And thank you for all you do, by the way.
Well, thank you so much for the question, Ben. I'm actually spending a lot of my time thinking about AI and also thinking about what kind of social safety net we're going to need because of how AI is going to change our economy and our workforce. I was on the bipartisan AI working group last Congress and am working on a number of bipartisan bills. For instance, I lead a bipartisan bill with Representative Horsford and Moylan called the AI-Related Job Impacts Clarity Act that would bring transparency and accountability to AI-driven layoffs. I also have another bipartisan bill with Representative Obernolte that would set up a commission looking at how AI is going to change the economy and what we in Congress will need to do. So in general, I think about AI and what Congress needs to do in a few key ways. So I guess overall, this is a very San Diego metaphor, so, bear with me. Well, I guess you guys all get it. When I say this metaphor to my colleagues, I have to explain. But basically, it's like we're all standing at the beach, and we know a big wave is coming. What we don't know is it a wave we can surf, or is it a tsunami that's going to wipe us out? And our job in government is to make it a wave that we can surf. So how do we do that? Now, I think Congress needs to act on 4 key levels when it comes to AI. We need to first look at the societal incentives that we are creating. So, for instance, we actually want companies to be investing in that kind of AI that's actually going to augment or make human work better, not that's going to supplant or take away human work. But right now, our tax code is actually the opposite. Right now, we incentivize companies to try and get rid of labor because we tax labor higher than capital. So I think first we need to think about, like, what are the incentives we are creating, intentionally or otherwise, and how do we make sure that the incentives are aligned with the world we want? The second thing we need to do on AI is at the model level. So I have a bipartisan AI Transparency Act that would mandate transparency for frontier models. I also think we need to think about pre-deployment testing, potentially something like an FDA for AI, where you have some kind of entity that is testing and checking and approving models before they are released to the public. Then we need to look at how AI is already being deployed in our everyday lives, right? The ChatGPT, Claude, all the things we use, like, they're actually just a very small part of AI. Much of AI is business to business, and a lot of companies you interact with are already using AI. And so I've introduced a bill called the Sectoral AI Governance Act that is actually going to enable the federal government to make sure that existing laws around housing fairness, around employment discrimination, et cetera, are being enforced, even when it's AI making those decisions. And then the fourth way that the federal government needs to engage on this is we need to address the impacts, the job losses, as you mentioned, Ben, but also the deep fakes and the intellectual property and all of these other things that we know AI is going to bring, and some things that we don't yet know AI is going to bring. So I have challenged my team to start reimagining the social safety net, especially because Donald Trump has gutted so much of it that we're going to need to rebuild it. And it's important that when we rebuild it with an eye towards what the economy is going to look like with AI and not just rebuild what we had. So I think that UBI could be a really important component of that. And I'm very supportive of guaranteed income. We have really good evidence for it. In San Diego County, we actually had a number of pilots. And in my first term in Congress, we were able to pass the expanded child tax credit that cut child poverty in half. So we know that unrestricted cash and guaranteed income can work. The question is building a system that's sustainable and reaches the right people. And one thing I want to be mindful of is that we don't want to let a monthly check become the excuse for a handful of companies to capture all the gains while everyone else gets a small check that isn't actually even enough to make ends meet, right? If you're currently working a job and making $100,000 a year, which we know in San Diego for many people is still quite hard to make ends meet, a $1,000 or $2,000 check a month is not going to actually be able to replace your job. And not to mention, we know that jobs are about more than income, right? They're about dignity and purpose and community. And so one of the things I think a lot about is what are the jobs that are going to be hardest to automate? And how do we make sure that those are good paying jobs? Jobs like childcare, because I don't know about you, but I don't care how good AI is. I am never leaving it alone with an infant without a human there too. And so how do we make sure that childcare jobs, for instance, are good paying jobs? And I think there's a lot we can do to make sure that we have that social safety net we need. And I think guaranteed income is a part of it, but we need to be thinking beyond that as well.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Folks, I just want to share the results. That final poll question that we asked, and we do thank you for your participation. We asked you, what issues are you most concerned about? And you responded, 10% of you responded healthcare, 12% of you responded the economy, 6% of you responded immigration, 61% of you responded democracy, 0 responded housing, 11% responded something other than those. Congressman, we've got a question from Mindy. Mindy is of La Mesa. Hi, Mindy. You're live on the call with Congresswoman Jacobs. Please go ahead, Mindy.
Hi there. Thank you so much for all you do. And just want to say thank you for using your voice. There's so many times that I see you speaking up, and you just make me so proud to be a San Diegan. So thank you. The question that I have is about the Tijuana spill and how that is continuing. I know there's obviously a million things going on at the federal level, but I do want to understand what is going to happen with this. Like, how are we going to get this under control? This is obviously starting to spread further out in San Diego, and it will have an impact on tourism and our economy. And I just want to understand what we can do and what's going to happen at the federal level.
Well, thank you so much, Mindy, for those kind words, and also for the question. So, look, this has been a public health issue for decades. I remember hearing about this growing up in San Diego. But I will say we have actually been able to make progress recently, and I think we are getting very close to actually having some real solutions. So for those of you who don't know, the basic problem is that the city of Tijuana grew faster than their infrastructure. And so they don't have all the infrastructure they need to treat all the sewage that comes out of Tijuana. And much of it comes to San Diego through the Tijuana River Valley and then ends up in our beaches, particularly in Imperial Beach and around Coronado. So since 2020, our congressional delegation from San Diego has been able to secure $650 million in federal funds. So what that is going to do is that it's going to ensure that the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant, so the sewage treatment plant on our side of the border that treats some of this sewage to help address the fact that Tijuana doesn't have that capacity, with that money, we're going to be able to double the capacity, which is going to make a huge difference. Now, we are working to make sure that that construction happens, that it happens smoothly and quickly and well, and that is going to be a main part of our focus. Governor Newsom has also recently announced $46 million in state grant funding, and we are working with the state on these efforts, and we are also working with the State Department and the EPA to ensure that the Mexican authorities are doing what they need to do on their side to address the treatment. I have actually gone and visited the new San Antonio de las Buenas wastewater treatment plant that the Mexicans have made that is hopefully going to get online soon and will start. So I know it's frustrating and this has been going on for a long time, but I do feel like we are very close to a solution.
Thanks so much, Congresswoman. Folks, again, I mean, like the poll question, and I apologize, some of you answered it unknowingly, and I want to put this out to you. We're interested in knowing what issues you're most concerned about. So please, on your telephone keypad, respond to this. What issues are you most concerned about? Press 1 for healthcare, 2 for economy, 3 for immigration, 4 for democracy, 5 for housing, and 6 for other. And again, we appreciate your participation. We want to know what issues are you most concerned about? 1 for healthcare, 2 for the economy, 3 for immigration, 4 for democracy, 5 for housing, and 6 if there's something else on your mind. Congresswoman, we are at the top of the hour, ma'am, and I want to hand the call back to you to share your closing comments or your remarks with your constituents. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I am so incredibly humbled that you've spent an hour of your evening talking to me. And look, I know that times are tough for so many in our community, but I want you to know that I am here in Washington fighting to make our government and our country actually work and deliver for all of us. And I love hearing from you. So please call us at 619-280-5353 or go to my website at sarajacobs.house.gov. Sign up for our newsletter. Let me know what's on your mind. And thank you again for joining me tonight. Have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you.